I walk into work every day and there's a portrait of him that was done and he's looking straight. So wherever you are, he's looking at you when you walk in, and I say hello to him every day that I walk into work, whether it's actually using words or just kind of giving him a nod, because I know he's watching, and he would say to me, or no, would say, what are you doing today to move your life forward?
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I'm very excited to chat with my friend and fellow tennis partner, Mr. Brian Legum. Brian, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Brian, will you kindly introduce yourself to folks listening?
All right. Well, so my name is Brian Legum. I come here to Delaware from a few different places. I grew up in South Florida, went to college and lived some time in the Big Apple or New York City, which is where I met my wonderful wife. I have 3 amazing children, Dylan, Cole, and Taylor. The Princess Taylor's in the middle. I work in Newark/Christiana. I might call myself a counselor of law. I work with the Hispanic community. Sometimes they call me gringo con corazón latino, which is like literally would translate, it would be like the white person with the Latin heart. And, I love what I do. I love getting to spend time with my family and, doing what I can to, move life and the people I work with in a forward direction.
That's pretty cool. That sounds like a very intentional outlook on life.
You could say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I will. So, Brian, how would you define living intentionally for yourself?
So I would say, I try to live my life, with conviction. When I say conviction, I said that I was a lawyer, not conviction in the sense of, convicting someone, because I do civil law. I don't work in the criminal, but, I like to live with, purpose, to have, with passion in the things that I do, and to know, well, I don't necessarily think about this every single moment that I'm doing something, but overall, I would say that I like to do things, with some type of goal in mind, an objective. That might be something material or something, as far as my, family is concerned, helping them live life to the fullest, enjoy the wonderful things that, this, to be cliche, this world has to offer, but to live with passion, to live with like oomph, so to speak.
Yeah. How would you spell oomph, by the way?
UMPH, maybe. Oomph.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, clarifying for the show notes. Yeah. So that sounds lovely, right? That sounds really nice. I'm wondering what that looks like on the surface in a given week when you feel like you're truly living intentionally. What might that appear as?
And so, if you look at it from the perspective, right now we're speaking, it's welcome to break to my typical, work day. But, on a Monday through Friday, so to speak, 9 to 5, living intentionally, I'm doing things to, in essence, better the lives of the people that I'm working with. The sad part of what I do is I'm working with people who I do personal injury and workers' compensation law. So I'm working with people who have unfortunately had their lives disrupted because they sustained some type of injury. And it might be in the workplace, it might have been in an auto accident or something else. And I'm trying to do what I can to help them or facilitate that person getting their life back on track, whether it's the simple act of calling to make sure that they can get in with a doctor to get the care that they need, to them figuring out what they can do to, get a job because they can't do what they used to do. The acts that I'm doing are, intentional in the sense of they're working towards the goal of getting them from, point A to point B, or, point A to point Z, and there's all those different letters in between. So that from a workplace perspective, I mean, that's very culled down, so to speak. But I'm doing, dozens of different actions throughout the day for several different clients to help facilitate that goal. And that's definitely done with intention. And then as far as my life outside of work, which I feel very blessed to have a wonderful family, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity of talking about that some more, but trying to take actions, do things to help my children grow and nurture and develop values. I got a call from my wife earlier today. It was one of those, our oldest, Dylan, is at a basketball camp this week. And we had one of those moments where she called and said, I'm really happy. Dylan sent us a message and asked if you could try some, performance drink. But he was he wanted to ask if it's okay if he tries this. And, Karen quickly looked it up. It was some type of protein recovery type drink. And, she said, sure, but I wouldn't drink all of it. You don't know how your stomach's react. But, we were very pleased that he thought of, this is something new. Let me ask as opposed to, he could have drank in it and never said anything to us or tried. But I think that's a product of the intentional acts that my wife and I do to kind of help cultivate values of making right decisions. And if you don't know what you're supposed to do or should do, seeking out advice from those that you look up to, and hopefully that's obviously in this case your parents. And the fact that he, called and asked Karen or sent her a message saying, is this something that what do you think about this? It's a decision that he can make, but he's seeking out. And that's something that, as a parent, as a parent, you feel that warm kind of indescribable feeling of I'm proud of my son for making this conscious. I mean, it's so simple. It was deciding if he wanted to have an energy drink or what have you. And he didn't just go right ahead. He intentionally made the decision to, I'll try this. And I haven't found out yet whether he did try it. I would assume that he did, but, he acted with intention in that decision-making process. And that's really, I'm like to feel proud that that's, something that's been instilled through, how Karen and I have worked to have him grow and mature. And he's the oldest, he's 11. And, my daughter's 8. And then my youngest, Cole, is 5. And the 5-year-old does everything that the 11-year-old does. He's the younger brother. And, while he didn't see this act that Dylan did, I mean, it's something that we could use as an example to teach Cole, to question things and ask and do things that type of nurture the mind and expanding. And he, doing that was, that's, if at the end of the day, what do you remember about your day? Well, I had a wonderful interview with Joe, and I also got a call from my wife about my son making a decision whether he should have an energy drink. And those were the highlights of my day. And how simple of an act that is. I mean, I think that that's one of those things that happens in a parent's growing as a parent, that they see, the product of the nurturing that they try to give their children.
Definite validation, right? And ideally most, if not all parents get to experience that, not just one time,
right,
but along the way. Yeah, that's some great validation in the moment too, because you're not done. You got a few years ahead of you until they're out on their own.
I absolutely do.
Yeah,
quite a few, so to speak.
So how about for you personally? What does it mean for you to live intentionally outside of your roles as father, outside of your professional role, just for yourself as an individual?
I mean, as an individual, I think, I make intention. I mean, if I'm going to put something concrete on it, making a decision to take action, something that's not going to necessarily happen in the moment, and following through with it. I mean, I talked with my wife a little bit about going, us speaking about this, and asked what's Joe all about, and well, he has this podcast, Intentionally Ever After, and talking about living with intention, and asked kind of her what she thinks that means, or what she would think I would say, which kind of is a beating around the bush to answering the question myself. But she right away brought up some of the decisions I make to do you know what, I'm gonna do something to get myself in shape, and I sign up to do an Ironman, and then I've signed up, I made that commitment, I've intentionally gone and signed up and registered, and now I have I could quit and not do it, or I could do what I need to do to get myself in shape to be able to accomplish that task. That's something that I did several years ago, and it was definitely for lack of a better, kind of a mind over matter as far as pushing yourself through in a given moment, the monotony of actions that you have to take to get to a destination, life that, every step that you take, you don't necessarily feel yourself getting closer to that goal, but you are moving forward. Right. And I think that I use that kind of the Ironman as an example of, how I like, because I have, a million different things going on at the workplace, but through the nature of my job, and working with lots of different clients, and in and of themselves, each one is their own case. Then I have 3 kids that you're managed, especially during a summer when they're out of school. One's in one camp, one's in another. My wife works. There's a lot of juggling, so you can get overwhelmed with all the stuff going on. And I think that if, I try for me, as far as living intentionally, is kind of doing what I can to simplify it and look at, what do I want to see as a result or growth, or whatever word you might use, as far as moving forward in these decisions that I make, whether they're decisions for myself, I make decisions I mutually make with my partner, my wife, for the betterment of our children, or for ourselves and our lifestyle, so I can achieve a desired outcome, and which is not always achieved, but I if I don't take those steps and I just stay stagnant, I'm going to breed negativity or disease, or just like a stagnant body of water might. And I think that taking those steps, we clearly, my wife and I learn from the mistakes that we make, probably more so with the first child, that, you learn and you don't make. That's why, the first, you have no idea what you're doing. And then as you go through the motions of, or going from, 2-on-1 to a zone, to a man-to-man, to a zone defense, which is what we have now, you learn that you really have to, make a commitment to your plan of action and how you're going to handle a certain situation, whether it's me handling a situation at work, or, being by myself on the road, or on a bike, or swimming in a triathlon type event, to my wife and I, managing, making the most out of, our ability to provide for our children. So, I mean, when you have to ask yourself, and I ask myself quite a lot, what is the, purpose of what I'm doing right now, the act, or, what's the intent, or, why am I choosing to do what I'm doing on a given day? Mm-hmm. What's my intended outcome? And I'm trying it, as you see, as much as I can, to kind of intertwine the word intent with what I have to say. But there's obviously a lot of synonyms to that, or similarities that can be made to some of the other word choices that I've used. But ultimately, living intentionally is, to me, is living with an objective, with a goal, with a desired outcome that still has very much part of it that's unknown. There's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I love it.
There's sure certain things I can do to have a guaranteed outcome, but to have the outcomes that I really want, I have to strive to into the unknown, or to the great wide open, as you would, some might say.
How do you manage all the trajectories you have going on and maintain intentionality with all the things you have going on in your life?
Not sure. How do I manage it? Sometimes, obviously, some days is much better than others. I think that, it's sometimes hard to manage them. You get, caught up in your thoughts, lost in your head. You question yourself. You have, the angel on one shoulder and the kind of the devil on the other, so to speak. And sometimes you have, kind of analysis paralysis, and it's hard to manage. When I get in that situation, to the other parents out there that, have, lots to juggle. And, I often think, well, when I'm at work and I'm trying to juggle all of that, I just think about how amazing my wife does when she does it, and that my work is much easier than that. And that gives me, a sense of calm. If that doesn't work, I step away. I'm a firm believer and advocate of meditation, whether it's be doing some type of, having a mantra, saying your head, whether it's, listening to a Zen in 10 on the Peloton, app, or, just closing my eyes and listening to some white noise and staying still for 10 minutes, which has an incredible power. I'm very much an advocate of that type of kind of, introspective thought and calming like the amazing number of neurons and things that are going on in your head, that it's hard to sometimes just like take a deep breath.
Would you mind taking me into that process of staying still? Is that something that you would consider a habit?
Yeah, you know what? I would say that it's a habit. I mean, I would say that the practice of meditation, and I think that, and I'm by no means any type of expert on meditation or getting into that Zen state where I'm, pinching my pointer fingers and thumb and saying for a bunch of for hours, and haven't spent time in a monastery or anything like that. But for me, I would say that it's a habit. I mean, I'm at least, a handful of times, a week, I'm going to, stop for a moment, clear myself of, the incredible amount of stimuli that's around me on a regular basis, whether it be the papers and the piles, within my office, or, the visual stimuli, that the world around provides. And, just shutting my eyes, sitting in a comfortable position and literally kind of zoning out to white noise. I mean, I'll set a timer. I do it for usually 10 minutes, sometimes longer. But usually I would say 10 minutes is my average, and it's like a great reset. And sometimes I'm not able to stay still, and I wander. But as I've done it and practiced over there, I would say I've been doing it probably for the last 3 or 4 years, say, on different levels of regularity. Sometimes I'll lose sight of it, and I haven't been doing it for several weeks or months. And then I'll wonder why my mind's going all over the place. And, someone will say, like, didn't you used to meditate? Didn't you used to do that? It seemed like I remember that helping a lot. And I'll be like, yeah, I did. And then I ease back into it. I'm like, I don't understand why I ever stopped. But, kind of life gets ahead of you.
And it sounds like you had a system that worked well, so that when life gets ahead of you, or when you get swept sideways, for however long it takes you to get back, you do have something to get back to and know that it works well for you.
Absolutely. And I think it's sometimes for me, it's to, forget or not focus on, well, I haven't been doing it for so long. Like, how am I going to get back into it now? Or if I haven't gone for a run in months, I'm going to start running, and I'm going to totally not be anywhere near where I was the last time I ran. So that's going to be defeating and getting kind of that like negative vibe and be like, you know what, like I'm going to be farther along the moment I start to run than I am at this very moment. So I feel the same way when I, gotten back into doing some type of meditative or calming practice. And, sometimes it's, I'll literally go into, we have an open garage in our work, and I have a relatively quiet car, and I'll literally go in and sit in my car for 10 minutes and put on my headphones and put on white noise and just say, you know what, 10 minutes I'm going to take right now to kind of silence all the outside influences and stimuli will help me kind of recharge and, to go back to kind of living intention when I feel like I'm just kind of like rolling with it and not, kind of just reacting to things as opposed to being proactive. I do something like that to kind of reset, and it works great for me.
Yeah. At the risk of this coming out of evergreen content, I want to talk about something maybe that's pertinent right now, given that things are moving back in this whatever COVID phase we're currently in. Right. What are things, how do you maintain intentionality as things move back to fill in the blank?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that, and I kind of go back to, or as I think listeners might be able to pick up on, things kind of come back to my kids. It's either work or my kids. Things revolve around children and providing life for them. And as far as how things have changed living intentionally since, there's been this shift from where we were, let's say 8 to 12 months ago with the pandemic to now. I mean, activities for our kids have completely opened up, and from things kind of, me living in two different spaces, that being like work and home, and then the car ride back and forth, which is a Zen in 10 by its in and of itself to reflect back to what we just talked about. But, the things have gone from being pretty stagnant in the sense of like the home or work, and the kids' things are at home and not, outside in the open, to being very, out in greener pastures, so to speak, literally and figuratively. It has definitely been, let me say, changed the dynamic in the sense of, we have, I'll use Dylan and, my oldest and my daughter as an example, two very different people. My oldest is very, very sports oriented. He's couldn't be happier to be out there and on the sports field and being able to provide him that gateway or that arena to exercise and be out there and do what he loves while maintaining, the desire to keep him healthy. With what's going on, conscious decisions have to be made as to, what I feel comfortable with, what my wife feels comfortable with, kind of going to the, a common denominator as far as our comfort level together. And of course, most importantly, what our son feels comfortable with doing is how, caused us to have to, make kind of unified decisions as to what we can do. He's pretty, we've been blessed with our kids being able to go to, throughout the pandemic, be in a school environment that hasn't just been at homeschooling. And we've been very blessed that, we've been healthy through this pandemic, though I've had to get tested tons of times with regards to the protocols put in place. So my son, my oldest, it's been, an exercise for my wife and I to make decisions. And then, in comparison to daughter who, has, had a different kind of reaction to the pandemic as far as her being comfortable, without getting too personal, with her environment and the stressors being out there, being very new for an 8-year-old to see, people, have a mask on all the time. And, and then my 5-year-old, a measurable double-digit percentage of his life has been experienced through a pandemic. And, it definitely has made, as a parent, you have to, really think about the decisions that you make and revisit them and know, like, I'm going to make this decision today. This is what we're going to try. We're going to see how it goes. And let's kind of go backwards and, have our kind of like family meeting to decide how did this work out for us? And I think that's been very much a regular daily, so to speak, conversation that it's gone on in our household as things have kind of opened up.
As things continue to open up, do you foresee yourself using any of the same strategies, such as the family meeting?
Yes, and I think that the silver lining to this pandemic is that the pandemic has been the being forced to have these conversations, being forced to be in close quarters. Obviously, it's very, I love being with my family, love all being together, but everybody needs their own space at times, and learning how to work with what you have as far as the confines of that the pandemic has caused, but also as things have opened up and things are just getting back to how they were. I don't necessarily say normal, because it all, that's a different word for, means something different to everybody. Going, back to, this process over the last year has definitely caused a different type of kind of growth for me, for my wife, I know for my children, as far as addressing, getting involved in different activities, acts, participating, interacting with people. I think that's the thing. We're a very kind of social family. We're not by any means all of us introverts. And that's been a hindrance, the pandemic. So as things opened up in a cautious and observant way, we've been doing everything that we can to open up at a pace that we're comfortable with.
Right. Within the parameters of things opening up, you have to feel comfortable as a family about what you're willing to do and when you're willing to do it. That makes sense. What have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
No, that's a great question, Joe. So, I'm growing up. I think that I was very much kind of influenced by the direction my parents pushed me towards, and I think they always had great intentions into what they thought this is the best avenue that my son should take. Should be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And ironically, I'm a lawyer now, but that wasn't always my intent. And when I started college in New York City, I right away, probably, I don't even know if I was responsible. I probably wasn't, for checking the box to kind of take that pre-med route away. And I'd very much been guided and directed by my parents to the point where I don't think that I had to make many decisions on my own. I kind of just went with the flow that my parents designated for me. And my freshman year of college, I hit this crossroads of feeling like I don't really feel like this direction of this pre-med kind of taking all these sciences is where I want to go. And I had to make what I felt at the time kind of this like rebellious decision of not taking that route. And I remember I was in the office of the dean of the school at the time, who happened to be my advisor. And I said, this is what my parents want me to do. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to major in Spanish language and Spanish literature and do a that and double in economics. And, I made that decision to do that. And I know that I got a call from, my parents. And are you sure this is what you want to do? This is what you want? Because, the opportunities that are out there for being a doctor are huge. And, they started naming all the different family members that had taken that route.
Oh, that's helpful.
Right. And I, moved forward and with the decision that now I'm, I work in the state that I'm, one of not only, a handful of attorneys that practice the type of law that I do, that I'm able to communicate in the native tongue of the clients that I work with, because I said no to living or taking the direction that my life was going to go, that someone else wanted to lead, and decided to make the decision to lead in the direction that I wanted to. And I'd like to think and know that my parents are proud of me for making that decision and standing my ground. But I would say that's probably the most, conscious, that I could think of, significant no that I've put out there to that stay positive, to turn into a big yes for me.
Well, it sounds like a significant impact. I mean, it is part of the reason that you have the passion for doing what you're doing today, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
What area in your life feels just about perfect?
I'm blessed with a wonderful family. I mean, I look, especially, if you spend just a few minutes looking at the, ever so filtered view that the media puts on TV and other forms of publication, so to speak. I have a healthy, vibrant family that is just like, especially in is the best, I don't think, medicine, that you can have as far as, living a life that has purpose and full of joy. I gave that example earlier about how great it made my wife and I feel when we got that, that call from our son and making decision, having 3, vibrant, healthy children, and a wife that I have, is a best friend and a partner, a spouse. People say, having a great relationship has its ups and downs, and it's not easy, and it takes work, but you want to love what you do. You want to love the work that you're in, and running and having a family it's work. It takes effort, but you want to love it. And, I couldn't, love it more. I try as much as I can to not bring my work home. And people say to me, you can't do all the work home. I'm like, yeah, I'll bring stuff home because it'll give me comfort to know that it's there with me in the event that I have spare time that I don't want to waste. But, when I'm with my family, I'm very, present. I want to take an active part. And, I work to get to increase the amount of time that I get to spend with them. And, the dynamic that I have with my wife and my kids to make the world to be cliche, a better place through the positive vibes that me and my wife and our 3 kids kind of put out in the world, is, I don't think, perfection, having a conversation about perfection is another avenue that we can take, because I think that there's always that goal of achieving something that's really kind of not achievable, but
sure. And it goes along with your theme of progress towards something and not having anything remain stagnant, right? That's very much a theme of what I'm hearing today.
Yeah. So, my family is, I couldn't feel more blessed than the kind of family dynamic and how blessed I am with having health and, every day in some form, seeing smiles on those people that I love and are closest and dearest to me.
Yeah, that sounds just about perfect.
Yeah.
Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
So, I thought a little bit about this, and we had some conversations, prior to even knowing what you did for a living, Joe. And, several weeks ago we had a nice time in the tennis court, and that prompted me into listening to your podcast that I'm so ever fortunate to be a part of right now. And I'm listening to some of the people talk and mention people that they're, close to and admire. And I have to say, that my father-in-law, Morton Kimmel, who's passed away a few years ago, and I'll probably get a little emotional talking about him, if that's okay, was someone that was, I called him an enabler, because he would talk to someone and he would see this potential with them. And you hear the old adage of potential, unless you do something with it, it's just potential. And he would do everything that he could to put into action the potential someone would have. And, he did that with me and inspiring me to go to law school. I took the route, of a different type of route, and ended up ironically kind of getting into the legal field later on in life and switching careers. But it was because of the things that my father Mort did to kind of enable me to make the most out of my life. And he was so, well known for just inspiring people to make the most out of their own lives. It's not that he, handed freebies to people that made things easier. He would do what he could to, he was like a catalyst, so he would, set that spark, but you had to fuel the fire. But, providing that little bit of, he was the biggest, one of the biggest motivators I've ever had in my life, and the impact that he had not only on me, but, everybody he was around, and kind of inspiring them to, make more of themselves, was, I've never, other than, my wife, the fruits of his labor, right? Emulates that, and she instills that in our kids, and brings that up in me. I mean, he helped, accelerate the course of my life by inspiring and enabling me to take the talents that I had and do something with them. I walk into work every day and there's a portrait of him that was done, and he's looking straight. So wherever you are, he's looking at you when you walk in. And I say hello to him every day that I walk into work, whether it's actually using words or just kind of giving him a nod, because I know he's watching. And he would, say to me, I know he would say, what are you doing today to move your life forward, whether it be in a particular case or with your family or with your, the relationships you had. And that's what I used to say. I mean, he was truly an enabler, and he's one of the most inspiring people that I've ever known.
Clearly, it sounds like his impact continues to be felt on a regular basis.
Yes, it does.
What do you imagine some people admire about you?
So it's hard. So to talk about your compliment yourself, or to, give yourself some praise. It's funny, growing up with, I'm a gadget guy. I love technology. And there was this old adage called WYSIWYG, which is the acronym for what you see is what you get. So if you read the first letter of each of those, it spells WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And that's what you get with me. I mean, people who know me, if you ask them what people admire, I mean, I'm a glass is half full, or it's far more than half full. Like, I'm a positive, I stay upbeat. I sometimes it could be to a fault. Like I'm very much an idealist. And my wife compliments me well on that, because, sometimes you need to, can't be too idealistic, and you need to look at what the kind of risks might be in a certain situation or interaction. But I always try to stay positive and upbeat and have kind of a good vibe. The other day, I was chit-chatting with a fellow colleague of mine, and he goes, "Do you know what, Brian? It's like, you're Ted Lasso." I'm like, "Ted Lasso? You mean like the show?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's a great show. I really love that show." He goes, "Yeah, he's always positive and he's upbeat and he's inspiring that team to reach for things that seem so unachievable." to the people around. But he just tries to look at an potential negative situation. And what are the positive ways to come out of this and go. And, I think that I have to do that in my work when I'm, meeting people under not great circumstances. People are coming in to me and they're meeting me and they're hurt. And, you can't, you don't want to sugarcoat and tell people, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. There's situations where it's not okay. And it is hurt, but, making a person feel like comfortable with me, making them feel like they can talk to me when they haven't had a long history with me. We've become close relatively quickly. We haven't, you and I haven't known each other long, and we're having this pretty intimate, deep conversation. I would think that we share, the two of us, that, that particular quality. But I would say that, as far as what people admire about me is that, that positive kind of feel good vibe that I like to give. You're not going to, if I'm down, people are going to know it, or I'm just not going to be around people, because I wouldn't want to kind of shed that onto others. So I usually like to, stay upbeat and positive, and, positivity, I feel like, kind of breeds positivity. So, I would say that that's fine.
Well, it seemingly beats the alternative, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. I am curious, though, what is too much positivity? What's the risk?
I would say that, not being regarded as being sincere and thinking like, oh, well, nothing ever bothers Brian. He's always positive and upbeat. There's plenty of things that bother me and get upset, and can make me upset. How long I stay upset or dwell them or let them control my actions is kind of the deeper question. But, understanding that, situations aren't always okay. I had, last week, I had fortunate to go to a funeral of a dear friend of mine lost his father. And, the father has, was a wonderful grandfather and had tons of grandchildren that really were around the same ages of my kids. So it would have been as if, or I felt similar to like when my father-in-law, who I said was the person who inspired me or I admired the most, when he passed away, it was devastating to my children. And this loss is devastating, I know, to the people that, were close to him. And, something, I would say being too positive would be, saying to those people like, oh, to the effect people like, it's going to be okay. It's not okay. You lost someone very dear to you. That's different than, I think, being, a positive, vibrant person. So I don't have to tell those people that were close to, the loved one that was lost that it's going to be okay. But, staying, upbeat and having kind of this kind of positive aura, even without saying anything is there. So I think being too positive is, telling people what you think that, they need to hear, that you think is going to make them feel better, that you even to yourself know that isn't true.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to challenge that. I don't think that's being too positive. I think it's being something else. I think that's being unreasonable. I think, to your point of having the aura,
okay,
I think you can remain positive without trying to reassure someone that everything's going to be okay. I think that's slightly different than being positive. I think it often gets lumped in with being positive.
Sure.
Right. And people probably would even label it as such if they heard you saying that, or heard someone saying that. It's like, oh, you're overly positive or Pollyanna-ish or whatever it is. Right. But I don't know. I think there's some discernment there. I think it's slightly different.
Sure.
Right. And depending on what you choose to say, how you choose to show up, you can remain positive, I believe, to the extent that you want to.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Good. Well, as long as you agree, then I'll make sure I
Right?
publish this episode. Good. Brian, is there anything that you want to circle back to that we touched on, or maybe something we haven't talked about that you'd like to share?
That's a loaded question. I mean, not anything in particular. I always wanted to, we talk about living intentionally, and I don't know how often, or if anybody I haven't gotten to listen to all of your podcasts, but how often have people been able to ask you what that means to you? I mean, intentionally ever after is your thing. So,
sure.
I'd like to know what it means to you to live intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I have been asked on the podcast, but I think it's my definition remains the same as it did the last time I was asked. So simply, it's for me currently to live intentionally. It simply means that I'm spending my time doing the things and with the people that I want to spend my time with. And that's it each and every day. The more, if I'm able to do that each day, then each day I feel like I'm living intentionally. I'm living the way I want to be living. And, the other thing I've shared previously that still holds true is my job is working with people to help them figure out or to remind themselves of what that looks like so that they can live their lives the way they want to live them. And not only is that, rewarding internally for me, but it's a constant reminder to myself to also do so, right? Because I can't get away from the idea of living intentionally. And it's a wonderful, constant living, breathing reminder for me. And it's a system, I've almost rigged it for success, I'll often talk about. So I've rigged it so that I'm constantly thinking about, what do I want to be doing? Am I living? When am I out of alignment? I can feel it almost instantaneously. So at this point, my definition remains spending my time the way I want.
Do you think, and I don't mean to kind of switch the roles and be the question asker,
okay,
but do you, you're in this profession and you practice, what you preach. I clearly know that from getting to know you. What are things that you do or share, generally speaking, to others on figuring out how to, catch yourself when you're kind of deviating from the course and not living intentionally or kind of straying? How do you catch yourself?
For myself, it's either in the moment, right? In the very moment, it's like, I get a pause or a pit in my stomach, like, I don't want to do that. Or why, like something feels off, just something feels off. Or maybe it's I'm going to bed and I don't feel like I made the most of the day. I'm like, what did I do? What decisions did I make that I will do differently tomorrow? Or what am I going to do about that? And typically it's nothing in the moment because I'm going to make sure I get a good sleep to go, that's all part of the living intentionally piece too, is, starting off with a good sleep and making sure all the areas are tended to. But it's the reflection piece. It's absolutely the reflection piece. Every day, throughout the day, I reflect. And if I'm feeling off, then I do a deeper reflection and be like, okay, well, what happened here? Right. And sometimes, to what we were talking about earlier, sometimes life comes in and gets ahead of us, right? Or sometimes we get brushed off course. And that happens even, with someone like me who has all these systems in place, right? It just happens, right? Like I certainly wasn't expecting or planning for a global pandemic, for example, right? So what a great opportunity to reflect upon and refine my systems. And things shift for me too, seasonally. So I'll tweak my routines to make sure that I continue to spend my time the way I want, because a lot of it has to do with spending time with my family. Well, seasonally, to your point earlier, also summer looks like it's different. It's in camps as opposed to being at school or this, that, or the other. So it's just constantly reflecting. And I think that's another piece is when I work with people, it's encouraging them to set aside the time to reflect and create these systems, because that's not a given. None of us are programmed to devote time to think about what we want. We just kind of go in and do. So anyway, that's a very long answer there.
Yeah. And I can relate to that quite a bit, because I would say over the last, 6 months, I've, very much so worked on dedicating time at the end of the day or beginning of the day before I get my day started to reflect on the prior day or what I want to accomplish that day. And it's getting started and actually doing that and spending a period of time to decide what I want to get out of my day and what I want to accomplish. I get far more out of it than I do when I kind of just go with the flow and, expect things to just fall in place and my day to be, uber efficient. When I kind of reflect on the prior day and plan it ahead of time, it's much more successful. And it's a technique that I learned prior to meeting you from, actually working with a coach that has, helped me, to use your words, that live more intentionally. When I reflected on not feeling like I got the most out of my day, when I'm asked, well, what did you intend to get on your day? It's easy to look back at the day and be like, well, I wanted to get this done and I wanted to get that done. But that's when I kind of look at it in hindsight. I set my expectations too high, so to speak. It was very easy to do that looking at retrospectively. But if I planned it ahead of time, I've been much more successful, and it's been a great technique.
Yeah. It sounds like it's worked out really well for you. And the other thing you did in working with a coach is you devoted the time to reflect, right? And you did so with a qualified accountability partner, essentially.
Yes.
Right. As opposed to just relying on yourself to hold yourself accountable to hold the reflective space and to do the planning, which is easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good question. Any other thoughts you'd like to share with the folks? Any words of wisdom, additional words of wisdom, I should say?
It would be hard for me to not say something that pulling the words out of your mouth. Ever since we met, I definitely use the word intentionally far more often. And you don't hear it always because all the conversations that I have are not with you, but I really, it's a simple kind of mantra to live, whether it's, you have intentionally ever after is your thing, but having some type of simple saying that, you can repeat in your head, or, it's, whether it be a ring on your finger or a string around your wrist, something that causes you to just take that extra moment at various points of the day to reflect on the direction that your day is taking on a daily basis.
That's a great idea. I'm going to leave it right there and say thank you very much. That was a great tidbit to share with the folks at the end there. Thank you for sharing the time.
Thank you, Joe.
Your words of wisdom. This has been great. I really appreciate you agreeing to come on with me.
It's been a pleasure.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.